Well, the hater's going to hate, 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 hate. But the question is, does President Trump have time to shake it off before November? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Bill Whittle Now has nothing to do with Taylor Swift, but it does have to do with Bill Whittle. And Bill, there's a report in Politico.com by a David Siders rounding up some polling information and some comments from Republican and Democratic pollsters, all of whom are basically looking at the group that they call the haters. And the haters are people who hate both candidates, but ultimately will make a decision. In 2016, the haters both hated Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but they broke for Trump significantly. In 2020, there is actually a smaller group of haters, people who hate both candidates, but in this case, they're breaking strongly for Biden. And this is essentially a kind of a swing voter group that you don't typically hear about. Just on the surface of it, Bill, is it possible that the Democrats, while you would say they have not come up with a better candidate than Hillary Clinton, at least they've come up with a less hateable candidate and one who may be able to garner the votes of those people who are going to vote anyway, even though they hate both?
Let me start by saying that there are some things that are beyond human capacity to imagine, let alone engineer. And finding a candidate more hateful than Hillary Clinton is one of those objectives. It's just not possible. So is Biden less hated than Hillary Clinton? Undoubtedly he is. I'm not terribly concerned about this. I think that the amount of people who either didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2016 or voted for him tepidly are now enthusiastic supporters would more than make up for this. And all of this, of course, is predicated on the fact that Joe Biden hasn't been seen really in any kind of action since his debate with Bernie Sanders in March. And given his rate of deterioration, you have to ask why that is. There's been some speculation that the Democratic National Convention might be entirely virtual. It's a big opportunity for them to not have to have their guy, under the lights where he might be a little confused. And furthermore, there's also been some discussion that Biden will not debate Trump because that's the end of the Democratic ticket. So to say that there's more hate for Donald Trump now than there is for Joe Biden doesn't particularly surprise me, and it doesn't particularly scare me either.
Well, it's not actually saying that there's more hate for Donald Trump than there is for Joe Biden. It's saying that among the people who hate both candidates, those people are more likely to vote for Biden even though they hate him. And there's more of them.
Well, I understand the argument, but we don't know what the percentage of the actual people who actually vote, what percentage of this is the haters. We don't know what. So it's a meaningless statistic. And furthermore, actually, it's not a meaningless statistic. It's a lifeline statistic is what it is. This is like Hillary Clinton saying that she decisively carried the hairstylists in the last election, which she actually did say.
There is a little bit of irony in the idea that the Biden campaign might be counting on people who hate him.
Well, the entire Democratic Party for the last 4 years has provided nothing except for hatred of Donald Trump. And I think what is astonishing to me and extremely refreshing is it is beginning to happen rather quickly, it seems, that all of the illegal activities that were committed against Donald Trump in order to promote this Democratic Party agenda, which is nothing except for this guy's bad, is starting to unravel, and some people look like they're starting to sweat. So I don't see how Donald Trump hatred can increase. Let's put it that way. I don't see how it can increase.
Well,
if we're going to talk about
Bill,
general
that's not
numbers,
the point, though, because I want to make this clear. They're not saying that people are going to hate Donald Trump more. What they're saying is that in general, like for example, Hillary Clinton was seen as the incumbent in essence. She was the establishment, and so among the people who hate both candidates, they tend to break toward the non-incumbent. They tend to break toward the new face in town. Okay, in that case, it was Donald Trump. In this case, even though Joe Biden is a dyed-in-the-wool, long-term senator, vice president, been in politics forever, he's been out of the limelight for a little while, and now Donald Trump is seen as the incumbent. And so that's, at least in some measure, accountable for the fact that more people who hate both candidates are going to vote for Biden, at least according to polling now.
I understand. And what the argument is that the people who hate both candidates hate Joe less than they hated Hillary.
No.
And
yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes. And since in 2016 they hated Trump less, they went with Trump. Now they hate Biden less, they'll go with Biden. As I said, first of all.
No, that's not true. That's the part I was disagreeing with because I thought that's what you were going to say.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Go ahead.
So they're not saying that they hate Biden any less than they hate Trump. What they're saying is they hate both of them. However, because Trump's the incumbent, he's going to bear their wrath.
Well, that means that they hate Trump more. If they vote for Biden over Trump and they hate them both, it's because they hate Trump more.
I can't disabuse you of this notion, but that's not what the polling is saying.
Well, please disabuse me of it because I can't make any sense out of it otherwise. Go ahead and explain it to me again.
Okay. Well, and I know this is kind of a weird little angle, a little niche of the polling.
Which is the bigger issue, but go ahead.
Okay. So the point is that they may hate them equally. You could look at Biden and Trump and say, gee, I hate both of these guys. They're both despicable. However, I've got to vote for somebody. So I'm just going to throw the incumbent out. It's kind of like what conservatives and Republicans were saying a number of years ago, which is like, It doesn't matter who's running. Somebody from the phone book, that's fine. Let's get rid of the incumbent.
I understand. Okay, so you've got the let's get rid of the incumbent thing working for Trump in 2016 and against him in 2020. If this virus had not happened, this would have been an absolute no-brainer. The improvement in the quality of everybody's life in terms of their paycheck is just enormous, and so on. And so there's simply no way that anybody could convince me that if you were just determined to throw out the incumbent, if you had the economy that the incumbent had prior to February of this year, then there's just no argument there. But what of course this article doesn't point out is that while you may be able to make a fairly rickety case out of this, well, people will just always vote out the incumbent. The fact of the matter is that if you look at the results of elections, incumbents have an enormous advantage. Always have had an enormous advantage. It's virtually impossible to get an incumbent out of office, and the number of presidents who have served one term in the last century is exceedingly small. George Bush, Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, Jimmy Carter. So the advantages of incumbency are so great that I don't see that this has anything to do except to say that it may modify it somewhat, but not change it. But I think the larger point here is that this is yet another case of some, where was the article published?
Politico.com.
Oh, well, imagine my surprise. So this is another case of a lifeline that's being thrown to Democratic voters, giving them hope, because they are pretty much out of hope. Bernie Sanders was the only thing that people were excited about. That's a baffling thing to say to me, but nevertheless, there it is. He's out. Joe Biden does not only not engender any enthusiasm. If you want to compare the situation to 2016, no one can say that Joe Biden is carrying the enthusiasm that Hillary Clinton had. It's true Hillary was more despised, but Hillary had the whole 30 years and the women's vote and the glass ceiling and the pay differential and all the rest of this nonsense. So what they've got is they've got a weak candidate. And what they also know they have is they have a weak candidate who is much weaker than the American people suspect, much weaker. And when you hear stories like this, where you try to thread this needle and try to come out with Trump may be in trouble here, or to me, it's just whistling past the graveyard. It's just simply saying, here's something for us to hold on to and hope on to and cling to and make us, get us through the night. The idea that the people who used to hate Trump less now hate him more for whatever reasons, if only because he's the incumbent. The incumbency is a much, much bigger advantage than the anti-incumbency is. This is proven by every election in the history of the country. And again, I think this is a kind of article that you write when you know you're in serious, serious trouble and are doing anything you can to basically keep your entire, forget even your base now, really, your entire party from just breaking down into hysterical sobs.
And in fairness, the article does acknowledge that the group of haters this time around is a smaller group. They don't say exactly what percentage or what kind of number they're looking at, but they're calculating this among registered voters. They also say that the Trump campaign has really yet to engage in earnest in a campaign to bloody the presumptive Democratic nominee, and that he certainly has some grounds for that. However, they're saying that as you look at the planned Trump campaign, or at least the one we presume was planned, it was essentially to run on a strong economy and to say that Joe Biden is an old school Democrat and has some corruption issues vis-a-vis his son and Ukraine and elsewhere. And so now this really calls for a whole new approach on the part of the Trump campaign, given the fact that we don't have that strong economy, at least at the moment, to run on.
It's an exclamation mark that they can put on it. Donald Trump can say accurately, look, we had the best economy in the history of the world. And along comes this virus from China. And Joe Biden has always been kissing China's butt. And I was the person who came in here and said, we got to disconnect from China. China is not our friend. And when I decided to stop travel from China, Joe Biden and the rest of the Democrats called me a racist for it. And so their position is weaker, in my opinion, than it was going into it. And to the degree that there is a great deal of uncertainty caused by this virus that really has changed the equation and essentially wiped off the existing numbers and rearranged the board completely. It's a new game, basically. But to the degree that has happened, it's one thing for Biden to make a once every 3-week comment saying that I think Donald Trump's doing a terrible job of this. When it comes down to the debates, and if Joe Biden for some reason refuses to debate Donald Trump, then Donald Trump will simply debate him in absentia. Then you're going to see what happens when Joe Biden has to remember things like coronavirus. And it is going to be a bloodbath. So it's always a don't get cocky kid kind of thing. And it is possible. See, here's what I think the real brilliance of Donald Trump has been in terms of the virus, the handling of the virus. That's the wild card in the election. If there was no virus, if there had been no pandemic, I think this is just a cakewalk. But it's here, and it does upset the apple cart in a number of ways. But I think the genius of Trump has been to go with this Federalist approach, because basically what he has done is he has let all of the governors make their own decisions. If a governor, forget the party for a minute, if a governor had made a series of terrific decisions and the state has done well, then Trump can congratulate the guy whether he's a Republican or a Democrat. And if the result is a catastrophe, as it's been in New York, Trump can claim in campaign ads, I know what the media says about it, but in campaign ads, Trump can say, listen, this is how our government is formed. The governor of New York made decisions for New York. The government of Texas made it for Texas, and New York is a catastrophe, and there you go.
And essentially, if you're a betting man, as Trump is, he would have bet in advance that the Democrats are the ones that are likely to overreact and botch the response because they'll put more power into the hands of government, resulting in less freedom and probably results that aren't any better and perhaps worse than in Republican-run states.
And what we find is something very interesting. And again, I think it is exceedingly astute, really, really astute. What we find is that the president has basically taken the Constitution at its word. He has, rather than all these claims of him being a dictator, we did shows months ago, Scott, about how the left was complaining that Trump wasn't dictatorial enough and not assuming enough power. But what he's basically done is said, no, this is how our government works. I'm the president of the United States, but I don't control these things. The country is a hugely diverse place. We'll let the governors make the decisions. But what's really interesting here is that Donald Trump now through Twitter is essentially a guy on the sidelines. Donald Trump is like, it's almost like he's the president and he's watching the Super Bowl and he's rooting for a team. You know what I mean? He's a Cowboys fan, let's say, and Well, I should have set it up so they're playing Seattle, but in any event, they're playing the Jets, let's say, and so you've got the president of the United States visible in his box at the Super Bowl, covered in let's say Cowboys memorabilia, clearly rooting for one side and waving the pennant and saying "Go Cowboys," but that is not having an effect on the game. Except it is having an effect on the audience that's watching the game. And this is what he seems to be doing when he says things like liberate Michigan, liberate Louisiana. When he says, no, Elon Musk is right. Elon Musk should go, that whole state should go back to work. It can be done safely and so on and so on. He has essentially now removed himself from the actual circuit of power and placed himself in a position where he is able to cheerlead for his team and therefore gain the continuing affection of conservatives by saying, look, I'm definitely in favor of opening all this stuff up. But at the same time, it's astute enough for him to be able to say that he is neither legally nor politically responsible for what happens in a place like New York or California. And he can do it because of the Constitution. That's not hiding behind the Constitution. That's understanding the Constitution, which again endears him.
He's left the Democrats who are saying, hey, where is that tyrannical president that we said was going to seize power and run things according to his own will?
Right.
We want him now.
Where is he? Well, we want the previous occupant to come in and run everything and tell us we can stay locked down forever so that the working people can be dependent on the government and the millionaire elites can then have whatever they want for themselves.
And by the way, Bill, I was
which
wrong
they get anyway.
About something, and I want to make a correction, and I'll make this the final question. So there actually were some numbers in this article. I went back and reread it, and it says that the former vice president, meaning Joe Biden, leads President Trump by more than 40 percentage points among that group of haters, so-called, who hate both candidates, which accounts for nearly a quarter of registered voters, according to Monmouth University's poll last week. So we're talking about a quarter of registered voters, not likely voters necessarily, but registered voters. And a quarter of that group, Biden has a 40% lead with them.
Okay, so let's just take that just to show you how pointless this particular analysis is, in my opinion. Let's just take that as read. I think that's a very, very generous assumption on our part, especially since we're talking about registered voters, but let's just take it as read. Against that, you have the power of the incumbency. You have the power of his record in terms of the economic performance prior to the virus. You have his record of opposition to China since the virus against Biden's. You have, most importantly, you have large numbers of people who voted for him with either great reluctance or didn't vote for him at all in 2016. And after watching the economy go and two Supreme Court justices installed and so on, are voting for him now either enthusiastically or in the cases that they didn't vote for him before. And all of these things, in my mind, enormously outweigh a statistic that is predicated on the fact that the American people have not yet had a chance to see who the guy who they supposedly hate less really is. Every single day that these Tara Reade accusations continue to grow is going to be a day where these haters start to hate Joe Biden more than they hate Donald Trump. And when all of this stuff comes out, and all of the China connections and all of it, when it's all done, when you get into the actual campaign, then I think this thing is going to largely evaporate, if not completely, and go the other way. And again, I think this is such a pointless article, and I think that the entire argument is so stupid that it strikes me as a serious sign of desperation from people who need all the encouragement they can possibly get at this point.
Well, if anybody has an eye for pointless articles, it's me, and our members actually appreciate us digging into the details of these kinds of things because they want to hear the kind of analysis that comes from a real conservative mind in the face of the progressive narrative. Those folks have joined the rebellion at BillWhittle.com by clicking the big green Become a Member button. And they are the funding mechanism primarily for this enterprise, but they also form a community of constitutional conservatives who interact with each other behind the veil, so to speak, away from the toxic sewer of social media. And they are able to encourage one another, to teach one another, and to build friendships that will last a lifetime. If that sounds like your people, you should go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member button. We'd also like to thank our friends over at the Patriot Post. We're going to give you 2 free things when you click the link in the description below. The first is a daily email update to let you know what's going on with some of the sharpest conservative commentary on the internet, as well as some of the funniest memes on the internet. And if you sign up for that email list, which is free, they're also going to give you a free copy of the Patriots Primer on American Liberty. Again, link in description below. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.